Thank you to the witnesses. Very interesting and important testimony. And I wanted to start with you, Ms. Fox, raising an issue about cybersecurity. Earlier this year, as you know, a water treatment plant in Oldmar, Florida was hacked, and the intruders apparently attempted to dramatically increase the amount of lye in the water treatment process. It was a near miss that could have been absolutely catastrophic. This is obviously a larger problem. Chris Krebs, the former director of CISA, speaking to this event, said that the vulnerability at that particular water treatment plant was probably more the rule than the exception around the United States. I note that EPA has asked for a small increase to $15 million in its budget to help these kinds of facilities harden their systems. So I wonder, first of all, do you agree with Mr. Krebs that was more the rule than the exception? And second, say a little bit about what the money you're requesting will do and whether it's sufficient.
Thank you for the question, Congressman. And one thing that you may or may not know about me is that I used to work for a local water utility. I worked for the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. And so I saw firsthand, working at a local water utility, how vulnerable water utilities are. So you mentioned the situation in Florida, but we have seen cyber threats, cyber attacks on other water utilities around the country. This is a critical issue when it relates to preserving public health. So this is an area, I think what is in the FY2022 budget is a start, but we are going to need, I think, more tools and resources in order to make sure that our drinking water and wastewater systems are cyber secure. We have, I think, made some really good progress in a voluntary way, working with the federal family, and then working with some of the national water associations, working with the associations that represent our state co-regulators. But I think we need to invest more in these water utilities so that they can develop cybersecurity plans. I think we need to start asking whether when a breach happens, is there a requirement that it's reported to the EPA? Because that's currently not the case. So I think that there's a lot that we need to do from a regulatory perspective and from a funding perspective. And I would welcome the opportunity to work with you and this committee on moving some of those issues forward.
Thank you. Would that require legislation, or is that a regulatory fix?
So I think one thing that we are doing within the Office of Water is really at the request of the National Security Council and the President, is what current regulatory authorities do we have that we could utilize to do more on cyber. But we also know that we are going to need, I think, more legislative action in order to.
And then in terms of specifically the reporting requirement.
The reporting as well as funding directly so that water utilities can make these kinds of investments.
Good, thank you. And then finally, just to echo the emphasis that Ms. LeBeouf provided on climate and climate policy. I mean, we had a record-breaking year in 2020 in terms of the number of billion-dollar weather and climate disasters in this country. 22. The previous record was 16, and we've seen the heat waves and what happened in Texas and subways flooded in New York City. And you know, I guess my quick question for you is there any amount of money we can spend on resiliency and hardening infrastructure that's actually going to insulate us from those kinds of disasters if we don't take dramatic action soon to actually deal with the cause of those disasters, which is the change in climate?
It's an excellent question, Congressman, and you know, I think this question is exactly why President Biden is acting so urgently to address the climate crisis. We have had a number of executive orders that I think illustrate the urgency with which the president wants us to act. The National Climate Office within the White House is doing an excellent job of convening the federal family on these issues. And it's why I think we so desperately need the bipartisan infrastructure framework to become legislation. It would really help us make a lot of progress on the climate issue as well.
Thank you. My time's up. I yield back.